the rest of the news, it's 1832 all over again. During Andrew Jackson's first term as president, the South Carolina State Legislature passed a bill, the Ordinance of Nullification, which exempted that state from collecting certain taxes required by federal law. In the constitutional crisis that followed, the young United States came as close to a civil war as at any point until the 1850s. Last Saturday, the Texas legislature passed a modern version of that nullification law, exempting Lone Star State residents from any future federal gun control laws. The so-called Firearms Protection Act was just one of a group of 12 bills approved by the Texas House of Representatives on what some are now calling Gun Day. Some of the other Gun Day bills make it easier to acquire a concealed carry permit and provide funding for armed marshals in elementary schools. Now, we all know that Texans love their guns, but what's with this radical interest in states' rights? I'm joined now by Austin Petersen, Director of Production, FreedomWorks, and editor at the LibertarianRepublic.com. Austin, welcome back.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, first of all, this whole 10th Amendment issue was first litigated, I'm not sure that's the right word because it didn't go before a court, but in the George Washington administration. Hamilton wanted to have a bank. Jefferson said the 10th Amendment forbids it.
Right.
Jefferson lost.
Right.
We got the bank.
Yep.
Hamilton said, no, you know, there's a fairly broad interpretation of what can be done, and, you know, so during the Jackson administration, when South Carolina said, we're not going to pay the export tariff on cotton, we want to compete with the other states, let them pay the tariff, President Jackson actually sent troops into South Carolina.
Right, right.
Should Obama send troops into Texas?
No, because the thing is that what you want to do is if you look at nullification, it has been used for good things in the past. So, for example, Wisconsin and Vermont used it to nullify the Fugitive Slave Act. So I'm all in favor of nullification.
But see,
I'm in favor of nullification when it advances individual rights, not when it takes them away.
So it didn't
but the point
didn't
is,
matter.
But it's still de facto nullification.
No, it wasn't.
But the thing is
it was a state.
The Texas bills are not nullification. Listen, nullification means that it forces the federal government refuses them from being able to enforce their laws within the state borders. Right. The Texas bills are not nullification. What they do is they refuse the states from being forced to enact the federal laws, meaning that the states should not have to force their own law enforcement officers to uphold federal law or to spend state funds on federal laws. So that's not nullification. That's just refusal to enforce. And all the states have that authority.
All right. Well, that being the case, then we're seeing the same thing with pot in California, for example.
Exactly. There's another perfect example of where we need nullification.
Well, or not, where what we really need is we need a change in federal law.
Well, that's right. I agree. We do need a change in federal law. But when the federal law comes and cracks down, and Obama's cracking down on cancer patients who are just trying to get their medicine, then we do need nullification. If the states need to stand up.
We need to change the federal law.
I agree.
There's this thing called the Supremacy Clause. We're not the United States if we don't all agree to all follow the laws that we've all
But we need a laboratory of democracy. That's what Jefferson wanted, that the states would all have the right to choose. And Texas is a perfect example of that, because Texas is now saying that you can't force us to use our own money and resources to go and enforce the federal law. I mean, that's always been
but they are.
The case throughout history.
Are they not asserting, or at least implicitly asserting, that they can prevent federal enforcement?
No, because that's specifically stated in these bills.
This is not nullification.
It's not nullification.
This is the complete opposite of what South Carolina did.
That's correct.
So okay. All of this is based on justifying the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, if you go back and you read the constitutional ratification debates, particularly the Virginia ratification debates, read the speeches by Patrick Henry and George Mason. Which
I love those. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's amazing is that Patrick Henry and George Mason were very, very clear and gave long, eloquent speeches about how we're not going to let them take away our slave patrols. Patrick Henry was the largest slaveholder in the entire state of Virginia, and in Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia, the state militias were the slave patrols, and everybody was required to be a member, and they had to, once a month ride around and look for slaves who might have gone loose. Right. In the North, they wanted to have the Second Amendment because they didn't want there to be a standing army during times of war. There was this fear of standing armies. We'd seen country after country after country in Europe have armies.
Legitimate fears.
Absolutely. Have armies do military coups. So
what are you trying to argue here, Tom? And what's the
what I'm saying is that the Second Amendment, in neither of those cases,
shall not be infringed.
In neither of those cases did anybody ever even remotely suggest that the Second Amendment was being written so that some guy someday could take on the federal government with a AK-47.
That's right. I don't agree with aggression, armed aggression, or hostility. There does come a time when you have to defend yourself, and the principle of secession was enshrined in 1776.
This is, Wayne Little Peter, or LaPierre, whatever his name is, he, when he was testifying before Congress, he said, no, the Second Amendment is there so that we could stop government tyranny. Well, nobody ever talked about that.
Let me just make a couple of points. The first one is that we've had recent Supreme Court decisions, such as Chicago versus McDonald and Heller, that have affirmed an individual right to bear arms. The Supreme Court has done that. And here's the thing. Gun crime, homicide crime is down 39% in the last 10 years. So whatever we've done with these Supreme Court decisions seems to be working. There are 50 million more guns now. There are 50 million more guns now than there were in 1993. So it appears as if whatever we've done in the past seems to be working. So why do we really need to change
What we did in the past is we took lead out of gasoline. There's actually some brilliant scientific research, and you're probably familiar with this, that shows an absolute correlation. It's about a 25 to 30-year distance from the time that you take the lead out of the gasoline, so the babies are no longer exposed to it until they're old enough to start committing crimes. We took the lead out of the gasoline, and we're seeing the crime rates drop. This has happened in country after country across Europe. We saw it in the United States. I mean, that science is in. It's got nothing to do with guns.
Well, if the federal government was forcing the states to carry lead in their gasoline, I would support the states being able to nullify that as well.
Okay, but I haven't heard you actually support nullification. What I've heard you support is resistance, which is a different thing.
I support individual rights and liberty above everything, because when it comes to nullification, if the federal government...
Even above society?
I do support individual rights above the collective.
Okay.
Yes, I do support
that. That's where we part company. Now, guns are made to last for 3 generations.
Perhaps,
this is a product... Well, no, seriously.
I have my grandfather's guns,
exactly,
and they're still usable.
Probably still, and because, I mean, if they're not really, really well made, you don't want to go near them.
Right.
So gun manufacturers know, somebody buys a gun, okay, they got a gun. We got to find some new customers. So now they're selling cricket guns, they're selling guns to little kids, they're selling pink guns.
Yeah, I mean, I had guns when I was a little boy. My father taught me how to use a gun responsibly. I think it's very important to understand how to use a gun, because self-defense is the most important thing that we can teach our kids, because there are bad people out there. And the Second Defense was created so that we could overturn any sort of tyranny that would come down on us, and that's a very important
So you're back to thinking the tyranny of the government.
Where Obama says that ignore those voices. Well, he's wrong, because Patrick Henry and the Founding Fathers knew that tyranny, when it came to us and
Patrick Henry, the largest slaveholder in Virginia.
Thomas Jefferson, they were all slaveholders.
Right. Okay. Well, Austin Petersen, we'll continue this debate.
Good one, Tom.
Another time. Thank you.
Thank you.